This is Basic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Chris Byrne was an intern at Atari Ireland in 1982, where he programmed a quality lot tracking system on the Atari 800 and then ported it to the IBM System 38. This interview took place on March 20th, 2017. First of all, was this in the United States or in Ireland or what?
Well, basically, it was in Ireland, and as you know, Atari had large operations there.
Sure.
And I was doing a applied mathematics course in University of Limerick, and they had come up with this idea of interns for students, which was kind of a new thing in Ireland at the time.
Yeah.
And it's now very, very commonplace. And I managed to get a job for initially it's 6 months out of your 4 years. Mm-hmm. So I got a job there in 1982 with Atari, and they had they had multiple operations in Ireland at the time. Mm-hmm. They had a plant in Tipperary, and they had plants in Limerick. And the section I got assigned to was a quality assurance line that tested the 2600.
Oh, cool.
So there was a bunch of folks playing Pac-Man all day. And I got the very nice job of working on an Atari 800, mm-hmm. Which was a step up from the initial Atari 400 they had given me to work on. And basically the job was to produce these labels, that the folks in the line produced these labels every time they found an issue with a machine, and all of the details would be recorded about, what went wrong or what have you. And I would have to, the program, it was all written in BASIC, would have to record this and produce a report.
Okay.
Once a week. And this report took about 3 hours to run on the Atari 800, but it was a great start. I really enjoyed it.
Neat. So this program would tally up what went wrong during the week and then perform a report at the end of the week. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It went in front of what was called a material review board, and they would decide what parts needed replacing and so on. But it was my first foray into programming for a business out of college as such. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because this was all done on the Atari 800 in BASIC. I mean, I can remember just in having to produce that report, having to do things like when you wrote the record out to disk, you had to write out a separate file of where it was so that you could sort it later. I mean, when we look at what we have today, it was very crude.
Sure.
But it worked. And what happened with Atari was that all of these different plants around the city of Limerick and in Tipperary, and eventually in middle of 1982, they decided to bring everybody together into one spanking new building. I sent you a picture of it earlier, mm-hmm. And its folklore has it that the side of the building is of the letter A, and it is now the Dell headquarters, and so I was brought in so we were all moving to this building, mm-hmm. and Atari decided to set up a big IT department, and the IT manager wanted me to take the coding that we had done for this QA line and basically, redo it on the IBM mainframe. And I saw this massive machine inside the room, and it was an IBM System 38. And I said, "Oh, I really like the looks of that." And I said, "I want to be able to code on that thing." And he said, "Right, here you go." And he threw me a bunch of tapes and manuals. You go figure that out. And I ended up translating the basic program into RPG on the IBM System 38. And that pretty much launched me into like a 25, 30-year career on that whole platform.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was seminal in that respect.
Wow. Is that a system? You said 25 or 30 years. That's not a system that's still used today in any capacity, is it?
No, not today. No. But it's still out there. It's
Sure.
still out there as the IBM AS400. It's called the I series. But yeah, I'm pretty sure some of my code is still running out there somewhere.
Nice. Nice. So, give me an example, if you can, of the kinds of things that would show up in this report. Like, what went wrong with these machines? Like bad chips, or I don't even know what to guess at. So,
Oh yeah, well, it could be anything. It could be from the cartridge not inserting correctly, bad pins. I do. I mean, it is 35 years ago.
Yes, yes.
I do remember bezels being an issue on the 2600, which would be around the joystick and where the cartridge was inserted. But these are the types of things that they would be finding on the production line. Essentially, they were assembling the units and then boxing them and sending them off.
Neat. So what happened then? You're working on the System 38, and then eventually your internship came to an end, or what?
Yeah, well, it did after the initial 6 months, but they had moved everything over into this new building, and this whole new IT department, and they had this big fancy computer room. So I ended up getting a Sunday job of doing backups and so on. So I actually stayed there for about a year and a half while I was still in college, but going back and forth. Helping these guys out. And then, as you know, in June 1984, or not June 1980, but sometime at the end of 1984, they actually closed. The Atari operation closed, and I think they had upwards of 700 people or so in the building at that time.
Wow. So did they give you a machine to take home and fiddle with, or was it strictly a work at work sort of deal for Atari machines?
They never did, and I regret that. I wish I had one. I guess I could pick one up on eBay pretty cheaply right now. Could I?
Probably could. Yeah, a lot cheaper now than then. Nice. Did you personally play games or anything, or were you just working, doing the basic thing?
I really loved the basic programming, and so that was one of the really, I did a lot of work on that, and I have to say I am a Pac-Man. I do like to play Pac-Man.
Nice.
I understand you wrote a book, did you, Kevin?
Yes, I wrote a few about the internet, when the internet was new, how to use the internet, that sort of thing, when no one knew how to use the internet, and wrote one a couple of years ago about called Terrible Nerd, which is kind of a memoir about being a kid geek in California.
Great.
Yeah,
because this Atari thing just doesn't seem to go away, does it? I mean, I was looking at Netflix a couple of months ago, and that documentary about those about Atari popped up, which was a great watch.
Oh, right, the trash site in New Mexico.
That's one? Right. Yeah. It was fantastic.
Yeah, no, it doesn't go away, and it just keeps getting reborn, such as it is, with the same name. Gets passed from one company to another, and they license out, this and that, and it never quite dies, which I guess is good. So what do you do today?
Well, I run a software company called SensorPro. It's a marketing automation platform, and and it's funny how how wheels turn, because Time Warner, which I think ended up being one of the owners of Atari at one stage, is actually a customer of ours.
Nice, very cool. And all right, what haven't I asked you about the Atari days that I should have? You must have a story or a memory that we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah, well, a small story, but it's not specific to Atari equipment as such. I guess it's more of a lesson I learned as a young college student, working for the first time for an American company, because that would have been all new to me. And I remember turning up, because I used to drive a Suzuki TS-125 motorcycle, and I remember arriving to work late one morning, as a tardy student might. And my manager, who happened to be the QA manager, came up to me, and he took my wrist, and he slapped my wrist, and he says, you need to turn up on time. And he says, by the way, that's what's called a slap on the wrist. So that was I was never late again.
Nice.
So that's my story.
It's a literal slap on the wrist.
Yeah, a literal. And now I know what that means.
Right.
But a lot of my colleagues that I would have worked with in Atari, they all went on to do, I still keep in touch with some of them, and they've all stayed in the software business. Quite a lot of them went to the US, and I remember my boss from the IT department went on to run more or less the same thing for Digital Equipment, who had a large manufacturing center for the VAX computer system back then.
If you could send a message to the Atari computer users who still exist and who are listening to this, what would you tell them?
Oh, never forget Pac-Man. Keep on playing.
Nice. Perfect. I think I have what I need. Thank you, Chris.
All right, sir. See you soon. Thank you.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are two ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/Savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.